over there up in Buena Vista?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I built it.
Yeah.
I hired a contractor out of California to take it out. I only had like 490,000 cubic yards of dirt. And I dug down, it was like 160 feet. And the hole was big. But you did, it's got to go up slow. And it actually went up like this. And it just seemed awful high. And when I thought,
Good.
I know you've had the road plans. He says 88 out. Point is, I know somebody that told me about that now a long time ago. He actually lived over there in Holland Park. It just seemed to me like that's an awful lot of dirt to be moved. Not because you're bad. Sorry, not because you're bad, but you can excavate that much.
I missed you. That's a lot of dirt. A lot of dirt.
Well, are you building that?
Yeah. How are you?
You can sit in your spot if you want.
No, I came over here to try to. You gotta hang out in the front there.
I don't think so.
I think I stole your spot.
That's all right.
I feel like playing it easy on the side.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, it's my third board meeting.
I just I'm going till
And I'm a little curious about that. Yeah,
then I got phone calls.
I had a couple more after this one. I said I got a higher call.
Well, the benefit slash
I will share my cookie.
I forgot about that.
So, and of course, you know what Easter is? You know what Easter is?
Is it real? I just kind of knew it was a little. Oh, I did not back. I thought it was.
I'm just saying.
It's close. I know. I'm giving you a hard time. But I just explained. No. Dan said, I took your spot. You have to go down there. So you're coming in.
Next month, let's switch it to that end of the
I
table.
think so.
Just really screw with people. Really mess with people.
I'm still sitting here. It's
Okay.
my side seat.
He's got it right here.
You got to put it right there.
Oh, yeah. Say that again today?
Just right now.
How'd the last one go? How'd the last meeting go?
Yeah.
You think I'm kidding? I don't think anything about it.
Yeah, no, he was sniffing.
Rick, do you need this? Rick? Oh, there we go.
Thank you.
You got it, man.
Only because we choose to.
But see, I agree with you, but then you go in contract.
Wonderful.
What's the UBT office?
I challenge you.
Oh, what, you pick up you don't make enough money for your teachers, so you gotta have some doctors? I wouldn't doubt it. You probably took one too.
That's just.
Right. One, two. I think we've got, 2/3 of us here, right?
You need 2/3?
No, we just need a simple majority. They're 11 and I count
Right.
7. Jennifer doesn't count. She's not a voting member.
You get to choose, that's right.
So we,
That was good.
I was on Channel 5 yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
How'd they go? I didn't see it.
I didn't see it. What was the...
Oh, the Trump stuff. Oh, you're yeah. We want to go to Manitou and yep.
Yeah, no, so any.
So I guess we're only doing this. I was thinking there were 11. Either way, we got a quorum.
Yeah. At 2, you ready to go?
Yes, Mayor.
It was just, and I can't remember when they asked.
Odd question. Channel 5. Well, how does President Trump's food policy? Well, it's still on that proposal.
I know nothing about it.
They haven't actually come out with what they're saying.
It got incredible.
To see how they like that.
The independent system,
Yeah, exactly.
there you go.
All right. All right, we'll come to order. We do have a quorum here. So before we approve the agenda, I would like to move one item up on the agenda. We're going to take item 9 and move it to right after approval of the agenda into item 3. Does anybody have an objection to that? All right, if not, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda, please. All right, that's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Oh, what am I doing wrong, Bethany? Sure. We'll get to that in just a second. Is there any opposition? No. Seeing no opposition, that motion passes unanimously. All right, before we get on to the legislative report and update, maybe we'll just go around, everybody can introduce themselves, and then, because we have new staff members, when you make a motion, please state your name before you make the motion so we can capture that adequately on the record. I'm Mark Waller from El Paso County.
Lojinos Gonzalez from El Paso County.
Yep.
Yolanda Avila from City of Colorado Springs.
Ken Giray, Manitou Springs.
Jennifer Ivey, legal counsel for the PPRTA.
Tyler Stevens, Green Mountain Falls.
Stan Vanderwerf, El Paso County.
Merv Bennett, City Council, Colorado Springs.
Dave Geislinger, City Council, Colorado Springs.
All right, thank you. So on to agenda item number 9, which we're bringing out of order, administrative actions and reports, legislative report. Our lobbyist is here and is going to come and give us an update on what's going on at the State House. Mr. Jablan. You don't appear to have too many bruises, so I don't think you're maybe not working all that hard up at the State House right now.
I've learned how to bounce on the marble over there.
That's right. All right, please take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Board, since our last meeting, the last two big items that we had that we were really watching and working hard was Senate Bill 88, which was a re-clarification of the marijuana tax for the regional transportation, the zoos, all that was inadvertently excluded out of the bill last year. That bill has passed all the committees, all the chambers, and is on its way to the governor's office for signature. So I think that's a bit of good news in that I think they've at least fixed that problem.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you. And just so for the record, would that require a follow-up action if that passes by the PPRTA? And what would that be? Or do we?
I'll be happy to take that one. I'm going to give you the perfect legal answer here. It depends.
That was the same one I had.
Yeah. So I think there's some action we're going to have to figure out following on. I know there's still litigation that's in the appellate process right now, and I think that's going to determine what our actions are moving forward. But for now, the bill has passed, which will allow those tax collections to begin according to law, though, again, there's litigation to figure out regarding the rest of it. I don't want to get too down in the weeds on it.
The bill essentially gives you the constitutional ability to collect the taxes. But there are, as Mark said, there's some legal actions and things that you guys will have to determine as a board the direction you want to take. I have worked with the House minority leadership, the Speaker of the House, the land graph bill of 2016, which would need a late bill status now. I never count my chickens until, May 11th. But the chances are very slim that we're going to see that again. Leadership is not inclined to go down that road and have that fight again and sign a late bill. She certainly does not have the support of the leadership of her own caucus to rerun that bill.
And for the members, the newer members of the body here, could you kind of explain what the issue was behind the 2016 piece of legislation?
Well, what the legislation, it wasn't involved in 2016, but going back on the last meeting, and Rick probably can do better than this, but it disallowed you from collecting taxes on the land you've annexed that Walmart wanted to take. And I believe the number I heard last thing that you could have lost potentially $25 million. You had $25 million into that project. Yeah.
So the issue was we'd put a bunch of investment in the new Walmart down in the Fountain area, spent $25 million of RTA money to, get all the curb gutter, access points, all that in, and then after that hadn't happened, Fountain annexed that area in and said, okay, well, once we've annexed it in, we're not a member of the RTA, you're no longer allowed to collect the dollars, to recoup your investment of this $25 million bucks. And so Representative Landgraf had put together legislation that would have said, we don't get to collect that anymore once a property gets annexed in. And if they're not a part of the RTA, then that property is out of the RTA. There were thoughts that she was going to bring that piece of legislation back this year. She talked pretty significantly about it, but because of Dan's hard work so far, that bill hasn't come forward.
And we'll stay on that with leadership, because now she actually needs a favor to run that bill from leadership. You know, so, and I don't think even her own caucus leadership is prone to allow that. That was a big fight, and I don't think they want that. Right now, this year, moving forward, we talked a little bit. We're monitoring Senate Bill 1 for you guys. Rick has asked me to monitor that on the transportation. It's the Senate's Republicans' big bill. But right now, what we're going to be seeing moving forward is a lot of message bills from both parties that will have no chance of making it through the other chamber. Senate Bill 1 probably falls into that category, but I did hear last night at a fundraiser from Senate Majority Leader Holbert, he thought there was some movement on it. The Senate President and the Senate Majority Leader are working behind the scenes with the House Democrats to see if they can find a path once it gets to the House. I don't think they're there yet, but they're working on it.
And you want to give us a quick update on what Senate Bill 1 does, please?
Senate Bill 1 gives the ability for transportation for an additional $3.5 billion once it goes to the vote. They're going to take that to the vote ballot in November. If that passes, there'll be additional $3.5 billion available going into the
through bonding
into the Senate transportation. So the House and the Senate, though, are a long way apart on the best way to fund transportation or how to fund it at all. Probably the next biggest fight you're going to see up there probably may not be this one. And this one, again, they say they have some movement coming, according to Holbert yesterday, but para may be the next biggest fight, down there, which will take up some transportation time. And they're going to have to choose their messaging wisely at this point moving forward. And I think you're going to see a lot of that. And those are the things that Rick had asked me to kind of keep monitoring while I was there. We worked hard on Senate Bill 88, and we'll continue to work hard on keeping Representative Landgraf at bay if she feels froggy to jump off of that curb. But I think we have plenty of juice to keep that, I believe, from happening. But we'll just stay with the leadership to make sure it doesn't. And that's about what's happening from a rural transportation authority thing at the Capitol right now.
Thank you.
Any questions or?
Yeah, Merv.
Yes.
Definitely a legislative term.
It's a legislative term.
So. And just real quick on Senate Bill 1. Senate Bill 1 is an initiative going through the state Senate now, sponsored by the Republicans in the Senate, to create $3.5 billion in revenue for transportation infrastructure in the state of Colorado. But that's done through bonding initiatives. And that bonding initiative would have to go to a vote of the people in November in order to and pass in order to create the mechanism to develop this $3.5 billion. The problem with the bill right now is that it repeals a bunch of the transportation infrastructure money that was implemented last year through Senate Bill 267. And our I-25 project is funded in large part by that money from 267. And so if the bill passes today as it was written, we would at a minimum have to delay our project by about a year because the 267 money would go away and the new money wouldn't be in place for another year. I also think, as I read the bill, and Dan can correct me if I'm wrong, the way I read it is, well, if the bill passes, that gets rid of the 267 money. However, if the initiative directed by the bill, the ballot question is going to go to a vote of the people. If that doesn't pass, there is no money to replace the 267 money that got repealed. and there's no money there at all in terms of the 267 money. So creates some issues for our project moving forward. I know that they're working on amendments to that. I think they'll get those resolved. And actually, I think based on what I'm hearing, this thing was absolutely dead 2 or 3 weeks ago, but now it's got a little bit of life. It may actually get there.
And I would agree. It has movement now, and I read the bill exactly the same way. And Commissioner Waller's synopsis there and complaints on the bill have been heard. In fact, you were mentioned by name last night in the meeting. They knew I was coming here, and they said, "Well, I don't." They called him Mark. They said, "I know Mark's got some issues with this bill. We got to work out still." So.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah. So they understand that they have not made El Paso County happy, and I know this is probably you were watching a more into the PPACG, but I was told that they are going to try to make El Paso County happy, according to
We'll get it worked out.
Majority Leader Holbert.
All right. Yep, Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you. Is there, just refresh my memory, is there another bill traveling through that has a recommendation for sales tax that would then also go to the ballot? I can't remember if that was happening or not happening.
No, there's another bill coming through that has no chance to make it through. That's House Bill 1119. That bill is pretty much dead in the water and not worth a lot of energy for us to be given much thought of. But those are the transportation bills that are working.
Thanks.
And I think what you're referring to, Commissioner Vanderwerf, is there's a private initiative sponsored by the Denver Metro Chamber in large part to come forward with a ballot initiative. In fact, they're pulling ballot titles right now on 3 different proposals, one that would have a 0.5% sales tax increase, a 0.62% sales tax increase, and a 1% sales tax increase. But that's independent of the legislative process, and they're doing that via citizen initiative.
Yeah, I think I might have sent you that article. It was in the Denver Post where they're trying to, it's going to go to the ballot to increase the sales tax to like $0.015 or something like that.
Yeah, I appreciate the update, Commissioner Waller. Actually, my question was to the legislative process, but they're both valid, I think, discussion points, so I appreciate you bringing it up.
Yeah, no ballot initiatives going through the legislature other than this Senate Bill 1. Well, not necessarily.
Senate Bill 1 has got some life. It was stalled out, but there's been a lot of negotiation. So during the legislative process, there is a chance it makes it through now, but they are very well aware of the issues that it would cause El Paso County and are working on it.
Yeah, my apologies. When I made the reference to debt, I was referring to the other one, not Senate Bill 1.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
right.
Very good.
1119, yes.
All right, any other questions for our lobbyist? Nope, seeing none. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Give Paula our best.
Yes, I've already paid enough alimony. I'm glad that you guys put me up front.
Thank you. All righty, well, moving on now. Public comment on items that are not on the agenda. Is there anybody here from the public that would like to speak on a matter that is not currently on the agenda? All right, seeing none. Item number 4, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the January 10th meeting.
Stan Vanderwerf, I second.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing no opposition, that passes unanimously. Item number 5, Citizen Advisory Committee Monthly Report. Come up, Lefty.
Yeah. Thank you. Jim Godfrey, Chair of the CAC. Rev and I are the Shoulder brothers, not the Brooks brothers. So I won, by the way, so there you go. Thank you for being here, or allowing me to be here. Quick review of the Citizens Advisory Committee. First of all, I'd like to just take a moment to thank Bethany for the tremendous support that she's provided the CAC. Friday's her last day. She's moving on to bigger and better fields, but she's been a tremendous support for the CAC, and we want to thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Before us, the city presented 4 contracts for review. After some discussion on a couple of them, nothing major. We have a recommendation for all 4 of those contracts. I'll leave those to the city to get into any details on those. The county came forward also with some contracts that were for some parcels of land that was tying up loose ends having to do with Mark Shuffle South. And Jennifer will cover that, I'm sure. And we recommend approval of their request as well. We did have a discussion on maintenance of effort presentations for, as you know, or maybe some of the new people don't know, part of the establishing IGA requires that each of the member governments submit a compliance letter for maintenance of effort, that they are meeting their goals in the IGA back to the 2004 snapshot that we had in time. And one of the council members brought up the fact that while you're meeting that number as a number, just throwing a number out, either $4 million in 2004, $4 million today, the buying power of that $4 million is much less today than it was then, and brought up the question of why wouldn't these or shouldn't these be some kind of inflation-adjusted numbers. We have no recommendation. The 2 alternatives for that are a board action or a change in the establishing IGAs, which is quite the process. But it was discussed. There were some really good comments about it. And the concern was just the impact on buying power. Are we meeting it by the letter of the law, but we're really making a marked improvement in expenditure on the roads? But we do recommend approval of each of the members' maintenance of effort projects. And then, as you'll get today too, CDOT was graciously came down, just a little, very brief background, several months ago after we had approved, you guys had approved the use of RTA money for the GAP, I-25 GAP project. And the issue of tolling came up several months ago. There was discussion about why tolling and how does the state manage that tolling money. And the word enterprise was used and whatnot. And so the CDOT graciously agreed to come back and give us a presentation on how that enterprise works, how they are able to collect money, what they do with it, how it's spent, and what that money potential, if it goes ahead of a toll road for the I-25 GAP, or managed lane, how that money would be spent and managed. And so they came down and gave us that presentation with some numbers along with that, and you'll get some of that today. But other than that, kind of wraps up what we had at the CAC meeting.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Godfrey? Is there a second? All right. All in favor of accepting the CAC report, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, please. All right, that passes unanimously as a non-voting member voted. So the CAC report is accepted. All right, on to financial reports. I think we can say neutral news, Bev?
Yeah. Okay, at first it looks like bad news, but on page 1, the December sales and use taxes were $9,138,000, and that was $470,000 below the monthly budget. So that put us $906,000 year to date, or for the end of the year, below budget. And out of $100 million, it's disappointing, but we'll get to how we fix that in a minute. On page 2, we're $4.5 million above last year's total sales and use tax, and the rest of the pages are the revenue and expense summary. Now, on this page that I handed out with your financials, and I'll read it out. It's for the Pikes Peak RTA 2018 budget amendment. So sales and use taxes are $906,000 below the budget. But after the savings and cost to collect sales and use tax of $70,000, we're $835,000 below budget. But interestingly enough, we have a increase in interest earnings because the interest rate went up and because we changed financial institutions about mid-year. So we're $989,000 above our interest budget. So we made up for it with that, and then the administrative and ballot measure expense savings gets rolled back in because we didn't utilize the budget for that of $104,000. So we're ahead of budget by $258,000, which is practically break even for a budget this size anyway, and then that will be allocated to capital maintenance and transit at the amendment time, which is mid-year. So are there any questions about that?
Actually, I do.
Yes.
Dave Geislinger. For purposes of planning and looking generically in holistically at what's going on in the economy right now, is this a fixed interest rate, or assuming the interest rates go up, will our interest rates go, our interest earnings go
Right.
up?
They've been going up every month, so they just go up based on what's happening in the markets.
Right. So we are not tied
Fixed
into.
in.
Okay, thanks.
No. So.
All right, any other questions for Neutral News, Beth? All right, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, on to item number 7, the capital maintenance and public transportation contracts. Mr. Chavez.
Good afternoon, board members. Mike Chavez, City Engineering. I've got 4 contracts for your review. First one is contract with a survey company, Rampart Survey, for operations and maintenance department to reset monuments and survey monuments and property pins that are disturbed with concrete maintenance work throughout the city. This is mainly in the old areas of town. There's a lot of 5x5 offset markers that are actually in the sidewalk, and those usually get torn out as they're making repairs. Next item we have for operations is a milling machine. In the memo, the prices that were submitted are listed and went with the low bid on this one. Then they're also looking at getting a small paver. There was 2 bids. The second one was not responsive. It wasn't to the specs that they wanted, so Ferris Machinery is looking to get the award. If there's any questions on those 2, I'd need probably Corey or somebody from operations to answer those. Okay, and then the last item is a design contract for HDR for the Circle Bridge replacement project. We are awarding a phase 1 of not to exceed $500,000. They're going to look at whether we need to rehab or replace the bridge. Then once we get that answer, we'll award another contract, or amend the contract to award a preliminary and final design.
And I do just have one point of clarification in item number 2, and maybe Corey can talk about this. I basically want to talk about the policy around using maintenance funds to purchase equipment.
Sure.
And how that kind of policy has evolved over the years.
Okay, so as far as I know, and maybe Rick can help out, I think it's policy number 24. Is that correct?
You're right.
All right.
Wow,
So
impressive.
Essentially, we are not allowed to buy vehicles, trucks, vans, things of that nature. We are permitted to purchase specialty equipment with our maintenance funds. So our mill machine and our pave machine, the mill machine that we have now is 13 years old, has over 7,000 hours. Industry standard for replacements around 4,000 hours. It needs about $150,000 to $200,000 worth of maintenance work just to keep it on the road this coming season. So rather than put that kind of money into maintenance of a 13-year-old machine, we can go ahead and purchase new and save that money.
I mean, is a mill machine really a piece of specialty equipment? I have one at my house. Doesn't everybody? No.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd want to take it down Academy. You might not quite reach speeds, but.
All right. Any questions on that? I just wanted to kind of identify that, and I know that had been a point that board members in the past had questioned, and just wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page regarding that.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions on anything on the Colorado Springs maintenance list? I will entertain a motion, please.
I'll second.
All right. That was item 7A, moved and
that was Stan Vanderwerf, sorry, for a second.
moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing no opposition, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
7B, El Paso County, Ms. Irvine, wearing the heart scarf.
Hey,
You get the only gold star for Valentine's Day today.
well, I'll just say that my daughters bought this for me a couple years ago, so it's like you have to wear it, right? So, happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Mr. Chair and Board of Directors, Jennifer Irvin, El Paso County Engineer. Wanted to just bring this forth with you today. Separately, these items really wouldn't require a board contract item, but when I brought this in front of the board, I think in 2016, I said when we resolve this, we would have a discussion about it. So we had a property owner that we had some difficulty with in regards to coming to an agreement in 2016 on a price for the acquisition. And what we did at that point was did a possession and use agreement with that property acquisition. And what that allowed us to do is deposit the fair market value per the county's appraisal into escrow, and that allowed us to get permission to actually complete the project and do the work while we finalize the property acquisition. This is actually some properties that we thought we might have to go to condemnation on, but I think we've reached an agreement in regards to this. And this is one, just so that you know, that hasn't been to our Board of County Commissioners yet, so it will be going forth to the board. This action will just allow the funds, and we'll be providing that information. But essentially, what we did is we went back and updated the county's appraisals based upon the time that we sent the notice of intent. There was a little bit of time between when we originally did our appraisals, because we were trying to move this project ahead. And so with the updated appraisals, which is based upon the notice of intent that date, the market had adjusted with those properties, and we are the property owner has now accepted our offer based upon the county's appraisals, the updated appraisals. So hopefully, as we look forward to this, we'll take it to our Board of County Commissioners and receive their approval, and we're just trying to move this along and wrap up loose ends. I think the value is just and in accordance with all of our Federal Uniform Act, which is what we follow, and happy to get it resolved and down the road. I would note that there's one of these parcels is related, is part of a development. The developer is actually rerouting some drainage facilities, and so there's some need for him to there's no longer some need for a portion of that property to be right away, and so that developer, with that condition of with that application for development that's going to be coming forth before the Board of County Commissioners, is actually going to reimburse the PPRTA for some of that that is no longer needed as far as right-of-way.
All right, thank you. Any
Long
questions?
explanation for hopefully a simple thing, but it's a lot of work that's gone into it.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you. So appreciate all the great work that the county staff did on this, but I am interested in, I guess for the record, but I'm not sure I can recall also the purposes of these parcels of land. I don't know if they actually have road over the top of them now, or if it was something along the side, drainage areas, or what was it for?
Both. A portion of the parcel has road in it. Some of it is just adjacent and provided some drainage. So we are we, the county, are retaining the portion that is necessary. The small portion of, that I talked about as determined to be unnecessary based upon some rerouting of drainage is some drainage that went across the road and through the property. Now that the development is in the position to move forward, and they haven't gotten there yet, but what we have advised the developer is that if there is a time that he needs to come back and vacate that portion, that the condition will be that he has to reimburse the PPRTA at fair market value for that portion. So he's not at that point, but I just wanted to let you know. That's kind of a standard policy that we've been utilizing as staff at the county, is that if it's purchased with PPRTA money and there's a reason to not get rid of that, but there's a reason not to have a portion or all of that anymore, that compensation goes back to the PPRTA.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion regarding item 7B.
I move for approval for item 7B. Stan Vanderwerf.
Lojinos Gonzalez, a second.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing no opposition, that passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other reports, City of Colorado Springs Transit Services Monthly Report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, board members. Craig Blewett, City of Colorado Springs Transit Services Manager. You do have our report in your packet, and go over some of the ridership numbers first. For our local fixed route service, we had a slight decrease of just over 4% in ridership, comparing December 16 to December 2017. Our ADA service, on the other hand, had a 16.5% increase. And our van pool program also had a 6.8% increase in ridership. Another note with van pools, in December, our vans were 90% occupied, which is terrific. As I've mentioned before, we have the ability to increase the fleet or reduce the fleet depending on demand, and right now it's pretty well right-sized. In terms of projects, the big project to note is that our spring service change proposal had gone out, and we had gotten public input. And the period for public comments ended on January 26th. So at this point, we're reviewing our comments and formulating our recommendation, which should be available in early March. The other item we have in there is just a report on a change order with our budget. Change order that we executed January 5th. And that was to move the remaining $28,630 in the Silver Key 2017 contract from the city account to PPRTA. It's a $0 change order that's intended to allow Silver Key more flexibility, latitude in terms of where it provides rides. On the city contract with Silver Key, those rides have to be within the city. PPRTA, they can be in the PPRTA area. So that was really the intent of that. And last thing to report back, Council Member Geislinger asked me last month why we had the increase during Sundays over the past year in terms of ridership. It's a great question. We actually just operate 11 of our 27 routes on Sundays. We have a very modest service on Sundays. Of those 11 routes, 7 saw an increase, 4 saw a decrease. But overall, it was an increase of some, I believe, 25%, which is notable. So the increase is really attributable, I won't say it. Thank you. to three of those 7 routes that increased. The big one was Route 33, and that's our Manitou route that serves the incline and the COG shuttle. And that's really just due to its popularity, increased popularity. Also, Route 4, we just started the fourth quarter of 2016, so it's had 1 quarter performance in 16, 4 quarters in 17. And then Route 11, we added a bus on Route 11 to improve on-time performance, and that attracted some ridership. So it's really those routes in particular that led to the increase.
I assumed it had something to do with the Broncos' miserable season and people getting drunk and taking the bus home. So apparently I was wrong.
All right. But with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any other questions for Mr. Blewett? All right.
Great. Thank you.
Oh,
Mr. Chairman, Yes, just wanted to mention, we are going to pass the hat to see if people would help us pay for the Manitou Incline Shuttle. So if there are any ideas or suggestions, we'd love to have some help in doing that. We'd like to potentially expand service if we can. I don't know, we have quite a bit of service now, but we're hoping that more and more people will use the shuttle and fewer people drive up Ruxton Avenue. So anybody has suggestions of how we can make that happen and perhaps pay for it, we'd love to hear that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, maintenance of effort. Mr. Sonnenberg.
The establishing IGA requires that there's what's called a maintenance of effort provision. It's the intent of the parties that funding from the PPRTA will not be used to substitute for or reduce any of the base year funding of each of the member governments. Of course, it's transit only for city or roadway maintenance for any of the 5 member governments. Again, for their non-RTA spending in 2004, which is the base year, they should not drop below. So each year the member governments submit their documentation to show that they are still spending that amount of non-RTA money in the maintenance or transit categories, and that they are at or above their 2004 level. And the CAC reviewed the 5 submittals from the member governments last Wednesday, and they're recommending to you that you find that all 5 have met the maintenance of effort provision.
Any questions?
First, Bennett, I move approval of the maintenance of effort report.
Yolanda Avila, second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of agenda item 8B, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Seeing no opposition, that passes unanimously. All right, Mr. Chavez, I think you're back up to talk about America the Beautiful pedestrian park bridge.
Mike Chavez, City Engineering. So we were asked to bring a little bit more detailed breakdown of the America the Beautiful park spending. So what I have here is kind of a summary of what we're planning on spending so far, and it's kind of broken down into design elements, which we've been approving contracts and change orders for the design. Some of the right-of-way items there that are listed have not been spent yet, but we anticipate paying those to the railroad when construction begins. We did approve some construction with G.E. Johnson last month to do that combined abutment foundation work, since that was the most economical way to do it. So we have about 2.6 that's either been reserved or spent, and I don't have that broken out. And we've talked about that the board has approved up to $3.5 million total. So what will happen is when we actually bid the bridge out, whatever's left, that difference between the 3.5 and what we spent for design and right of way, we'll put toward the construction, and that'll cap the RTA expenditures for that project.
All right, any questions regarding this particular project? It's informational. And to be clear, this is being done with maintenance funds, correct?
No, they're capital.
Well, it's capital
Yes.
funds. It's on the RTA list?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Godfrey.
I just might add, Jim Godfrey, Chair of the CAC, if you want to find this line item, it's under Pikes Peak Greenway improvements is where this funding is. It's not a line item for the PED bridge for across there.
Right. Okay, thank you. So on to 8D, the change order for property acquisition report.
So we've listed here some of the change orders and that we have for capital and maintenance projects. And the reason the list is pretty large is that we had made a commitment to also list the task order that are written against the on-call contracts. So this is just some of these are change orders and some are just task orders for various projects. It's an informational item.
Are any questions? Okay, thank you very much. All right, how about change orders for El Paso County?
Jennifer
Red
Irvin, El
Heart
Paso County. Just a couple of property acquisition items on Monument Hill Road, one of which the property owner accepted our offer, and the other one which is a donation, which is always a great thing to receive. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions? All right, seeing none, let's move on. Let's get ready to rumble here. 8F, the CDOT I-25 gap presentation. Mr. Hall, you're going to be doing this?
Chairman, sir, thank you. Board members, my name is John Hall with Colorado Department of Transportation. I am the design lead pre-construction manager for the I-25 South Gap project. Let's see if I can see this close. There we go. So, as was noted earlier today, Nick Farber with our High Performance Transportation Enterprise provided this briefing to the Citizens Advisory Council last week, and I'm here today to provide it to you. Talk about the GAP project. What is the GAP? Certainly, we're going to discuss express lanes and their operation, how they look, and some of the traffic modeling we have on them, and funding for the project. So this slide shows you the corridor of I-25 from Monument to the south side of Denver, and specifically circled there is the 18-mile gap that we're talking about. The only remaining 4-lane segment of I-25 between Colorado Springs and Denver has not seen a major widening in 60 years. So that is the project, that 18-mile stretch. A little bit of history and background. A year ago, CDOT began a planning and environmental linkage study for a larger stretch of Monument to C-470, a 34-mile corridor. In that process, CDOT reviewed over 100 alternatives, did various levels of preliminary engineering to help evaluate those alternatives. But the key takeaway was the 18-mile gap stretch really was the most urgent for us to put a project forward to fix. In light of that process as well, we came up with, as you guys are all familiar, the purpose and need, the key criteria that we're trying to improve on the corridor. Capacity, travel reliability, safety, and travel options and mobility. One of the very big emphasis is safety. With over 1,800 crashes in the corridor in the 5-year period from 2011 to 2015, that's a rate of about a crash a day. Our statistics show that about 9% of those are wildlife crashes. That's something that's been brought up at our public listening session meetings, people inquiring about that. And along with that, a lot of inquiries about the total cost of the project. It is a high, what we're estimating here is a pretty high per mile cost. Wildlife crossings, again, those safety issues, the wildlife accident rate is, depending on exactly the corridor you look at, or the limits of what you look at, can be up to about 9% of reported traffic accidents. And anecdotally, from our maintenance forces in spring and fall in particular, you're seeing they can clean up multiple, sometimes carcasses in a given day, and daily.
And this is
Yeah, Mr. Geislinger, Councilman Geislinger.
Councilmember Geislinger. Is there a breakdown of the seriousness of the accidents, wildlife versus, just if there's any way to break that down?
Well, I would have to look at our reporting on it. The wildlife accidents are not generally, I think we have 2 fatalities in the state, a year. Yeah, so that isn't the most,
Right.
It's vehicle-to-vehicle accidents that cause and vehicle-to-person, right, with the law enforcement officers that are the most severe accidents by far. But the number of wildlife accidents is probably far in excess of what's reported as well. So the main point is, again, safety is really, even though it's number 3 on this slide, is really one of the biggest focuses of our project. And we'll talk about that a little more in a minute.
I think we have another question. Commissioner Vanderwerf?
Yes, thank you, Sam Vanderwerf. So do you have, well, maybe it's up there? No. I was looking for data with regard to deaths within that gap, like trending data from 10 years ago, 20 years ago?
Well,
to today?
2011 to 2015, there were 5 fatalities on the corridor, and I think it was 620 of the 1,800 crashes were injury accidents. So about 1/3 are injury accidents, and, you know, a rate of a fatality a year, given those statistics.
So about a fatality a year and 1/3 of the accidents resulting in some kinds of injuries.
Yeah.
Has there been an indication of that trending upward, or is it, in the last 5 years, it's been more or less the same?
Well, that was the period that we have really good data on.
Okay.
You know, they are in a little bit in arrears, the data coming in. I'm not aware of us getting more recent data for 2016, 2017 yet, but I could look into that.
Okay, thanks. For me, it's just a question about, you know, is there something we see as far as trending? Certainly the statistics are there, the numbers are there, those are not good numbers, but I was interested if there's trends in those numbers that you can find. And so.
Yeah, I'm unaware of any significant increasing trends right now. It's just kind of high as it is.
Okay, thank you.
So what you see on this slide represents 4 options that were analyzed in the Planning and Environmental Linkage Study, the larger study. And it's important to point out, we've heard a lot in our listening sessions about that bottom road, you know, 2+ lanes. Hey, 4 lanes. We've heard a lot from it even this morning at the PPACG board. You know, that should be our preferred alternative. It obviously does as good a job. There's 2 aspects of this project, though. When CDOT identified the 18-mile gap and said it's going to put emphasis in the project management and getting this project out the door, we have made some decisions, and one of those is we want to get a project out as rapidly as possible. In order to do that in a corridor that has, you know, significant PIM-GIM habitat, Preble's Meadows jumping mouse, everything from wildlife conservation easements, we really need to try to scope a project that stays within right-of-way and absolutely minimizes the environmental impact and footprint. We've also been projected that $350 million budget. Both in the PEL study, and I recently used some of CDOT's tools that our project management office has set up to help predict project costs. A 4-lane option is about a $450 million project we project. So our budget that we've identified right now is $350, and that's where the one general purpose lane, one express lane are really the 2 alternatives that we're carrying forward. Again, so the primary reasons are budget, and a 4th lane option would also carry a very high risk of significantly increased environmental impacts. Probably no longer a streamlined environmental assessment, but maybe even an environmental impact statement. So that's part of the decision making, you know, why CDOT, the environmental assessment we're going through right now, is focused on the 3-lane options.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you. This is Lojinos Gonzalez. So I'd seen this before. And later on, I think I understand why the reliability is good under the express lane and fair under the general purpose lane. But for mobility, why is express lane good and a general purpose lane fair? I don't see where there'd be much difference there. Diversion of local roads, I don't see how having an express lane versus a general purpose lane would improve that one over the other. So could you explain the difference and why a general purpose lane does not meet mobility as good?
Well, it really is in how those criteria include travel options and diversion to the local roads. So here there isn't a good local road network to parallel. I mean, the frontage roads in Castle Rock are kind of an example that get really bogged down very quickly. But so by having that option for the driver on the roadway itself, that's why we evaluated that as better in the express lane. The option is right there for the drivers. They don't have to go to State Highway 83 or County Road 105 if there is an accident or some delay. That's the primary.
I still don't really understand how there's a greater benefit under the mobility. I mean, a person can just move into the general purpose lane as well if there's an accident. So I don't understand that part. Reliability, later you'll show you have increased speeds on the express lane because of the way it's managed. So that one makes sense. I honestly do not see the difference here.
I think.
Yeah, Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you. And some other questions. First of all, kind of a more generic question. So you are working on wider shoulders. Appreciate that. Is that a design with regard to wider shoulders on both the left side and the right side?
It absolutely is.
Okay. And I just haven't, done the research. That's an important thing to have, both left and right side. There you've got statistics or data that says it really is valuable to have for the purposes of shoulders regarding incident management and the other terminology you have on the chart. It's important to have that wide shoulder on both the left and the right.
Yeah, with enforcement in particular, I mean, our current plans and in discussions with emergency responder groups, law enforcement, our plans right now include, for example, enforcement openings and you'll actually see one of those in a later slide on US 36, in the center median. So that's an area where law enforcement likes to have the capability to stage for enforcement in particular and for emergency response. So that inside median is definitely necessary. In order to keep this project within the right-of-way limits as well, the primary place for widening is to the center. Bringing it in, bringing the two roads. A lot of the corridor will have a retaining wall, but coming into one central point. Most of the curves and stuff in this corridor, you're going to need those inside shoulders. When you put up a barrier on the inside, as would be necessary with this design, you're going to need that additional shoulder also for sight distance around curves. Various design criteria like that are going to need that extra space as well. So it's good for enforcement. It's good for, accidents do happen in the left lane as well, being able to move them off onto the shoulder as well. Flats happen in the left lane as well. But I'd have to pull up. There's been a recent push by Federal Highway Administration, and for some reason I'm drawing a blank on the name of it, but for significant statistical analyses of safety. Generally, that right shoulder, I do believe, has a higher, if you will, benefit per dollar than the left. But there's numerous design reasons. Another important design reason on this project, though, is the flexibility. So structures, in particular, they're going to have this additional widening, will therefore be able to accommodate easily with some shoulders in the future as well, a 48-foot, 4-lane footprint in the future. And right along with that, phasing this project, it's really critical that we phase this project in order to maintain a solid 24-foot pavement surface during construction with as much shoulders as we can possibly provide. So the additional width, particularly in the inside median, gives all of those.
Yeah, thank you. So, having grown up in New Jersey, I just lived with, and so did everybody else, many instances where a wide shoulder on both the inside and the outside of the highway, one of those two was sacrificed in order to have sufficient lanes. And I'm just not aware if that significantly increased safety problems or not. But I am, with regard to having the wide lanes on both sides, just on the surface it sounds like a good answer. Are those lanes wide enough for could one of those two be considered as a fourth lane? And we did have this discussion earlier in the PPACG regarding fourth lane, so I'm kind of interested in just a little bit of exploration of those options, and then I'll have another question with regard to the general purpose lane row up there.
In particular, the inside shoulder, again, because of the sight distance issues now, granted that's targeted points in the corridor, but there are a number of curves in the corridor that are relatively sharp, the Upper Lake Gulch in particular. And in terms of the enforcement areas and openings in the guardrail, turnaround points for law enforcement and emergency response, maintenance, all of those. The inside shoulder would be a challenge to just simply say, oh, that's 12 to 16 feet. We can just throw an additional lane on there. That's not in and of itself feasible to do. Just, hey, it's that simple. It would be a challenge, the sight distance in particular.
And for my understanding, what is a typical width of a lane for a highway such as this?
12 feet.
12 feet, okay. And the shoulder is, the intention in the design is to have a 16-foot shoulder on both left and right?
No.
A
No.
12-foot shoulder?
Right now, I mean, through most of the corridor, we're proposing as a baseline a 16-foot inside shoulder. Again, that's in large measure the curves to make sure structures are large enough. We also want to build in flexibility in the design. The planning and environmental linkage study will continue. Again, we're trying to keep a project on a very tight timeline. And that does involve some simplification of the scope, not getting too crazy on the scope so that we can have an environmental assessment cleared and get to construction. But certain elements like a climbing lane up Monument Hill southbound and maybe carrying all the way back down the hill to the way station, that would be a very beneficial option if we can at least make it, have the pavement there ready to go, if not even inserted into the project, in a final phase. So, for example, on that stretch southbound climbing the hill, what you'll probably see is the final design will transition that 16-foot inside shoulder into 16-foot outside shoulder with a 12-foot inside. And then that 16-foot outside shoulder really gives us the flexibility for that climbing lane. Maybe it's a variable use, maybe it's only during peak periods, but we have those options available.
And I'm sorry to kind of continue with this line of reasoning. I just want to make sure I understand, what we're thinking about here.
Sure.
So you did talk about a transition of 16-foot, left to right side, depending on what would be the best design. But given that that isn't happening, what's the intention for the width of the shoulders on both the left and the right? 16 feet for each?
No, it's 12. I mean, it's basically 12 feet minimum.
for each.
12 feet minimum, but through a lot of the corridor, we're going to have 16-foot inside
And then you'll
in
have
order
a
for some extra
smaller
pavement.
outside because you're just varying it. Well, I guess maybe you just have a little bit wider pavement at that
Yeah.
point, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And then with regard to the general purpose row over there, I would concur. I don't understand the rationale for the fare on the mobility, and I am not sure I can agree with the fare on the reliability either. With the express lane, the expression of good, you do improve the travel time for the express lane, but because you're managing and metering access to that through the use of the toll, you are pushing vehicles over into the other two lanes. So that actually increases the travel times in those lanes, and because of the increased density, that also potentially reduces the safety of those two lanes. So I don't really understand the expression of good in the express lane and the expression of fair in the general purpose lane. My question for you is, and I have been asking for it, and I imagine you've got a study that says these things, and I do want to see that in detail.
Well,
okay,
so
and maybe this is it.
This is it's a value judgment. There's no doubt. It's a value judgment, and it's based largely in what you see here today on this slide. The numbers on this slide represent the traffic modeling. Again, that's based on Dr. Cog, PPACG modeling, putting that into the focus model that's used extensively in that process. And in order to evaluate the corridor, parallel routes, all of those things are evaluated in that model. And this is what is forecasted for the speeds on the corridor, starting in 2021, opening year, with the two general purpose lanes we have today. The middle columns there are the three general purpose lanes, and then to the right is the two general purpose and express lanes. On the left of those is the express lane. So there's the analysis of the look on it. Now this is really just days old. This is a draft analysis. I mean, we're trying to get the most cutting edge information up, at our listening sessions and available to you. So I certainly, would advise that there will be some tweaks to this. I personally have had some questions about, that 2040 number showing 36 miles per hour across the board in the general purpose lanes because, Commissioner, I think it's common sense what you're saying, right? I'm not sure that maybe some of the assumptions in the model are being a little too generous on express lanes here. So I think we're going to continue to look at that. But this is the fundamental analysis right here, and it is that you have a reliable option all the way out to 20 years with the express lane, with those things on the right. And particularly after you get about 10 years out, it's not considerably different, the operations, the delays that you can expect to see in the general purpose lanes, whether they be 3 across or whether they be 2 across. So, obviously this would account for an increased use of the express lane over time. As congestion increases, certainly more people will use it. Again, our tolling and revenue study and our traffic modeling stuff is still a few months out of being finalized. But what this represents, for example, some of this initial modeling shows that as much as 40% of the traffic in the express lane could be HOV 3+. So that's exactly the type of stuff we want to incentivize on the corridor through a managed lane. If we can really get that significant a number into HOV 3+, an argument could be made that that's actually lessening the number of vehicles then overall on the road and in the general purpose lane. So those are the types of management techniques. It's certainly not fully a toll lane at all.
And with that conversation, does the study that you're conducting, that's not concluded yet, is it also considering an HOV option? And this was something we also discussed about, this morning. The conversation seems to always revolve around the tolling lane, but I'm interested. But it's okay. So you are. Okay.
It absolutely is. It is not unheard of. C470 it looks like an open up operation, from my understanding, without an HOV option, because they have such the tolling and revenue study came in so much. They did bond a significant amount of money based on that, and there are certain dynamics that make it not productive. The peak period shoulder lane, which is a different type of facility than what we have, I'll show that a little bit later on. But up in the mountain corridor, the peak period shoulder lane, where we just open the shoulder 100 days out of the year. Hey, everybody's coming down the ski slopes with 4 people in their car, so if we made that free, that wouldn't operate the way it's supposed to. But in this corridor, I definitely think we're anticipating, like we do see on US 36, HOV 3+ is a definite option that is highly likely and will be utilized significantly.
Thank you. And I have no more questions for you right now, so we can continue on with the meeting. But I do have an interest in continuing the dialogue with you, separately. And thank you very much for the information.
So again, I just want to emphasize, this is the crux of the why CDOT evaluates the reliability. It's having that option that goes into the future, and the fact that that the express lane also has other entry and exit, limiting of entry and exit points, so that you really get that, quote, express traffic, people making the trip to Denver. Those things, that prevents weaving in and out of lanes, which increases and benefits the overall operation of the road as well, and improves safety, right? Less people weaving across lanes. That's a conflict point that it does cause safety issues. Okay. The next 3 slides show you some representations of the corridor, and certainly at our listening sessions, one of the big things we've emphasized is, nearly doubling the pavement on the corridor, and again, the dramatic safety impacts and effects we expect that to have. That, with the ability to move accidents off the roadway, to get around those accidents safely, accidents are going to be cleaned up and off the road quicker. Those are really going to be some of the most substantial benefits to all drivers across the corridor. So again, this is just a more close-in view. I don't think this provides any information you guys don't know. The general purpose lanes remain free. Express lanes would be managed, and again, that management certainly can include non-tolled options. So one last kind of 3-dimensional, if you will.
Hang on, Commissioner Vanderwerf. Yes, thank you very much. So I see that you have a buffer lane between the express lane and the other 2 general lanes. What do you typically design into the width of the buffer lane? Is that 4 foot or something? Or?
4 feet is what's being proposed right now, and what's also being proposed would be a rumble strip to just make it a little less comfortable for cheating.
Okay, thank you.
So certainly our emphasis on express lanes, a lot of it comes from situations like this, the T-Rex corridor in downtown Denver, where, and as our listening sessions have pointed out, there are options for the people who are stuck in this traffic. One is, hey, just get off on the city streets, and we even had one person generously tell us how wonderful his drive is on the city streets. He can get zooming along. I'm not sure I really believe that, having worked in Denver for 15 years in Region 6 and 1, but that was certainly his opinion. But and there is the rail option here in Denver, so that is an option that is afforded. What we don't have in the gap is those parallel, either a city street option that really goes through the corridor. We certainly don't have train right now. Although I should point out that our planning and environmental linkage study, we'll continue to look at that and those types of options into the future. But again, we're trying to fix an immediate need and do it in a way, though, that has the flexibility to meet both funding needs for maintenance, long-term reliability, all of those things. So areas where express lanes are in use already in Colorado, US 36 between Boulder and Denver, I-25 central and north of Denver, and in various parts that's being expanded currently and under construction or about to be under construction in parts all the way through E470 and to Fort Collins. C470 is under construction with express lanes right now. I believe that's scheduled to be completed this year. I-70 between I-25 and 225 also will begin construction imminently here. That's been now under contract, and that will be a tolled facility there, again, from I-25 to around Pena Boulevard to the I-225 area east of Denver.
But really, this slide could be updated to say any new capacity moving forward that's not already through the EA process is going to be tolled.
Yes, I'm not sure that I can say it will be 100%, but that is certainly where the policy is, and that the policy that Transportation Commissioner CDOT implemented in 2013 highly supports that.
And most of the places that already have EAs completed were done in such a way that they already contemplate for express lanes, in particular tolled lanes. So, for example, Powers Boulevard in eastern El Paso County, if that were to be updated, the EAs partially through the process that contemplates express lanes.
It's certain. Now, the EA, there are completed EAs on those stretches, right? But reevaluation could put us in a circumstance where we relook at it. I'm certainly not, going to claim to know every fine detail, but the Powers Corridor would, in my previous life, which was just 4 months ago, when I was a resident engineer here in the Colorado Springs office working for Mark Andrew, Powers Corridor is my corridor. Was my corridor to work on there. Powers Corridor being a urban non-highway right now would be a little less, less conducive to it. Although the environmental assessment does have interchanges and converting that to a freeway operation. Within the environmental assessments we have right now, it doesn't have express lanes, but it certainly could be reconsidered and might need to be because of the age of those environmental assessments.
Thank you.
So, we do like to point out on this slide that E470 is not on the list because, of course, our facility is not in any way being promoted to be run like 470 is tolled across all lanes. So this is US 36 in operation. This stretch of US 36, you can't see it from that slide, but the toll rates there are 35 cents and 70 cents, depending on the two distances you're going to travel. We're not going to see rates necessarily that low on this corridor because these are tighter distances. But, I think Herman expressed this morning, Herman Stockinger with our Policy and Government Relations Office, and it's certainly not at all unfeasible to assume when our tolling and revenue studies come in that we're going to see rates here during most times below $3 and even in the highest peak times around $6. And it's worth pointing out that previous slide with the delay was a PM peak period. I mean, that's the PM peak period that we think, is still after 10 years going to start to degrade. We think, obviously most of the time of the operation is going to be pretty good. But this stretch of US 36, that fourth lane on the right side is an auxiliary lane coming in. So this is a similar 3-lane section to what I-25, the gap would be.
And
Two general.
What's the population of Boulder?
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have the population numbers, but I can tell you that this stretch of US 36, I did look up on our Otis data, and is about 20%. It changes so rapidly between different segments, but 10 to 20% higher than the traffic, the peak traffic that we see on the gap.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, I don't.
No, that's
have your
fine.
answer on
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yeah, it's Commissioner Lojinos Gonzalez. So my comment here you're kind of showing this as a, great improvement, but would we have had 30%, 29% if this was all general purpose lane? There's no comparison is all I'm saying here. Is you could have had the same thing if it was all general purpose, or better, or worse, but it doesn't compare.
And it's a valid statement, sir. Yep.
All right.
The express lane, and it's really just shown for information, again, we're not going to see 52% increases in travel time because this does add a lane fully for use, but it's where it is in operation. The technology is in operation, and the technology really only came to fruition fully where we could efficiently use this in recent years, in the last decade, which is another reason why the 2013 Transportation Commission policy went into effect. So this isn't information to any of you guys, so I'll just skip through it. A little bit about the funding. Again, if anybody has any questions, I think that you guys as a group know about the funding, but $250 million of CDOT SB 267 funding from the SB 267 source would be anticipated for the project. We have a current El Paso County as the actual applicant, $65 million infra grant application. And then, of course, the local share, that PPRTA, in particular, with $15 million, and the I'm sorry,
You got those
10 million,
backwards.
10 million, and the El Paso County with 15. And
The slide's wrong.
oh man, I'm colorblind, so I apologize, or I would have caught it. But yeah, it's well. We have the right.
You have the right numbers. You have the RTA and El Paso County switched.
Yeah.
That's all.
Make a comment.
Yeah, sure. Commissioner Gonzalez.
And then Lojinos Gonzalez, and again, as we mentioned before, anticipated, so upwards of those numbers. So just up to on the, they aren't guaranteed because we have to have that revenue stream come in.
Yeah. Well, I dare say that all of it is not 100% guaranteed right now, right?
Right.
So we're
All right.
So what's going on going forward is the environmental assessment, which is evaluating primarily the most important thing is the wider footprint in wildlife crossings, 3, possibly a 4th in the vicinity of the town of Monument, deer fence, all those safety improvements, the wider shoulders, wider pavement area, and then of course the 2 options within that wider footprint. One of adding a general purpose lane, one of adding an express lane. The timeline is going forward. We hope to have public meetings in in April or early May of 2018 for the environmental assessment process. An environmental decision document in May or June. That's, of course, a very, very critical piece to us moving into final design. We are certainly on the cutting edge, if you will, of our level of design that we should, can be doing prior to an environmental assessment. So we need that environmental assessment in hand to be able to move into final design, and in order to complete that design this year and move into construction as well this year. And of course, a project this big really will have some design elements, carry on a little bit past this in different phases of construction. We're probably not going to just advertise one huge 18-mile project. It'll happen in chunks. In fact, in all likelihood, 3 chunks, probably the north end, south end, and then the middle, based on the different complexities and structures. So Obviously, this slideshow we've been using during our public listening sessions, so as many of you members have attended, and then we appreciate that greatly. And so there's our website and i25gap.codot.gov and our email address i25gap@codot.us.
All right. Any questions that perhaps Commissioner Vanderwerf or I did not cover?
I'll just.
Councilman Geislinger.
Well, we've got.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Mr. Godfrey.
If I may. Jim Godfrey, Chair of the CAC. I just had two comments. One, I made this comment at the CAC. I'm leery of a comparison between Highway 36 and I-25. When I worked at Division of Wildlife Headquarters, I drove to 58th and Broadway every day, and 58 miles each way. I've driven that road to Boulder. It's busy in peak periods. The middle of the day, it really tapers off in the mornings and afternoons. I don't see that tapering off on I-25. It's a consistent volume, and there's a lot of commercial traffic because it's an interstate running down through the middle of the western part of the country, not a connector between two residential hubs such as Boulder and Denver. So I'm leery of this comparison, other than comparing how that section of highway works compared to what their proposal for a managed lane would work between here, not in terms of volume. And I don't see that differentiation in their comparison. And the other thing is HOV3. Went through this in Florida and at a bedroom community of Tampa. There's a societal and a cultural change of getting people to shift to an HOV3. And while that may be easy inside the bounds of a Denver metro area, we got a long distance and a lot of different diversity in terms of the traveling public. And I'm just really not sure that an HOV3 is going to provide the relief that we need for the traffic volume in this stretch of road. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Council Member Geislinger.
If we can go back to the funding slide. The $250 million is provided by Colorado CDOT funds, correct?
State's 267 money.
Right.
Yes.
And so if you could elaborate just generally, who are the stakeholders and the contributors to that corpus of funds?
Well, so.
I mean, it is. Go ahead.
I believe the funding source, I mean, it comes to CDOT, and the Transportation Commission that we have gets, validates where that goes, in conjunction with, of course, the COGS.
And I'm just trying to open up the whole thing, because there's been some of my constituents are of the opinion that El Paso County residents are paying for 100% of this. So the $250 million frankly represents persons who are contributing throughout the state, and then the state makes a determination of this is an important thing from the statewide perspective, correct?
Well, your chairman's shaking his head opposite. I mean,
but I'm asking from your
perspective. It's from the state tax revenue source.
And then
I should say it's a state tax revenue source that would be paying back the bonds. Bonding.
Yes.
Yeah, it's bonding that's actually generated out of the sale of buildings within the state.
Right, yeah. Right. But I'm just, from the funding authority for the $250 million then.
It's statewide, though,
It's
yes.
statewide, and it's a statewide, okay.
It's not just your constituents.
And from the statewide, I think Commissioner Waller talked about this, is that constituency, if you would, the statewide constituency has made a determination that managed lanes, HOV lanes, toll lanes are the way forward on a project like this. And he's shaking his head again, but he can.
Well, I'm not sure that I have a valuable perspective to give you on this one. They are in use around the corridor, and I'm sure there are people who feel that our communities have it, we've accepted it. I don't know exactly where they're
Now, the $65 million that's contributed from the federal, what is the federal financing authority's perspective on construction with these kinds of managed lanes, HOV lanes, toll lanes, things like that?
I think I would go with what Herman Stockinger said. From our perspective, they look very favorably on facilities that can generate their own revenue, at least to cover maintenance and operations, some basic maintenance operations cost, if not even provide funding for the road. In some cases, express lanes are projected to bring in enough revenue initially to be able to bond off of. That does not seem to be the case on our initial projections on this corridor. But again, in the future, if the congestion really does increase like it says, then more use will occur on those lanes, and there is the potential too that we there's some bonding that could happen in the future to expand the road the next time. So hopefully that answered your question.
It does, and then the other question I was going to ask, and it's totally unrelated to the financing side of this, but in the future use time deals, are you taking into consideration the impact of self-driving cars, things like that?
Not expressly, because there really isn't the ability to forecast exactly where that's going to go. There's kind of wild projections about you could have 3 times as much capacity in a given lane by having, bumper-to-bumper wire, driverless cars. We don't have the ability to really, acknowledge that technology. Oh yeah, that's definitely going to happen or not. But we have the flexibility with express lane to handle that.
And so the future usage estimates are based on current
standard. Yes.
The current
yes.
driving.
We are not assuming some super efficient.
All right. Thanks.
Yes, Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you, and I appreciate your taking so many questions from me. So there's been a little bit of a discussion about an HOV3, but I do have an interest in understanding if the study and looking at different types of managed lane concepts is considering both an HOV2 and an HOV3. I don't know if that is known or.
I'd have to get more information, confirmation from the High Performance Transportation Enterprise, but I think I can very honestly tell you that HOV2 plus is not in consideration by our right now. It's not considered effective, and across the board they are at HOV. They tried some HOV2 plus, and it is across the board HOV3 plus.
For a conversation later, I'd like to get a better understanding of that and just understand it, but not for here. And then one other question, there is an interface consideration also. So if the recommendation ends up being for a tolled lane, you also have the third lane both north and south of the gap area. So what is going on with regard to the research about that? Is it just this section, or is there consideration for extending that further north?
Based in part on current law, converting the current federal law statute, they're converting existing general purpose lanes into express lanes as a non-starter. There are, I believe, a certain number where the federal government is giving California some ability to look into it and to perhaps implement a few spots, but it is not an authorized thing. So what would be considered based on the knowledge we have of the law right now and where the law stands right now would not be at all to convert those lanes. However, they're planning an environmental linkage study. As that continues into the summer, once we get through the environmental assessment process, you can, whether you're a betting man or not, is going to determine, but you can bet that an additional lane through that stretch will almost definitely be pinned in the very same conversations we're having right now, and very likely be proposed as an express lane, all the way up to C-470 to get connectivity.
All right, thank you. All right, on to agenda item number 10. I think our need for an executive session is no more.
Correct. To just address a question from earlier, I do foresee the need for an executive session likely in March, but due to this impending litigation that interplays with the legislation, which is not yet signed into law, so it's not really ripe to have that discussion at this meeting.
Thank you. And we have any update on our case?
No change. Still waiting for the Court of Appeals decision.
All right, any other member announcements? Seeing none, we are adjourned.
Waiters.